Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are going to be starting right now. Our event today our forum today is Women in Construction, and we thank all of you for joining us today. I'm Norman Ruano, and I'm the Deputy Director of Illinois Works for DCEO. It's great to have you here joining us in this very important conversation. One of the key things I wanted to mention before I introduce and thank some of our panelists and also facilitators today is the fact that women by far are the most underrepresented group in the construction industry and the trades in the state of Illinois. And at the Office of Illinois Works, we are working very proactively in implementing innovative programs to reduce the lack of equity that we see in the construction industry. And women is certainly one of our focus populations due to the inequity that we see. So I want to thank today our panelists that are joining us today that will join the discussion about the trends that we see and the practices that have proven to be productive to bring about equity and inclusion in the construction industry. But I first want to thank Dr. Yolanda Clark from NIU for agreeing to participate and present on the statistics of women in construction. And then also Dr. Gia Suggs, also from NIU, for facilitating this event. So thanks again for joining. It's a pleasure to have you. And Gia, thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to you now.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ruano, and welcome everyone. Glad to have all of you all here. Glad to be here as well. I would like to introduce our first speaker. So Norman has already mentioned, she is Dr. Yolanda Clark. She is a senior research specialist with NIU's Center for Governmental Studies, Workforce Development, and Economic Impact Analysis. The focus of her projects have been diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and workforce development. She has over 20 years experience in community development, affordable housing, and economic self-sufficiency initiatives. Prior to joining NIU, Dr. Clark worked as an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Community Development in Delta State University. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Yolanda Clark.
Good morning and happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Suggs, and thank you, Dr. Rona, for having me. I'm very excited about being able to present to you the data related to women in construction in the state of Illinois. I want to start with an overview of women in construction in the state of Illinois for 2021. According to the EMSI estimates, there were over 221,000 people employed in construction in Illinois. Now, as you can see, females only account for about 3.3% of that amount. And that's roughly about 7,300 women in the industry. Now, when we break that down by trade, more women are in the construction trades with the lowest wages. I've highlighted in green that 7.4% of women were working as painters in construction and maintenance trades, and that was with an average wage of about $22 an hour. Now, the least amount of women were working in the trades with the highest wages. Now, about 1.5% of women worked as plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. And as you see, it's highlighted in yellow, and the average wage was about $43 an hour. Now, the information for this particular slide and all the following slides was pulled from the Department of Labor's Registered Apprenticeship Program Information Database System, we refer to as RAPIDS. The time period for the data is from July 1st, 2015 to June 30th of 2021. Now, this slide and the other slides will show representation in construction trades by sex and by race. Okay, the top row shows the percent of active participants in registered apprenticeship programs. And I want to stress that we're talking about registered apprenticeship programs because, we do have apprenticeship programs that are not actually registered with DOL. The bottom row shows who actually completed these programs in construction. Okay, now as of June 30th, 2021, there were over 13,000 registered apprentices in Illinois. Now, the group with the highest representation was white males, followed by Hispanic males. Now, in this data set, Hispanics can be any race, and most Hispanics are included in the white category, because when they fill out the information, they have the opportunity to check ethnicity and race, and sometimes they, will classify as or identify with the white race. I wanted to clear that up so you can better understand the data. Okay, nearly 80% of the apprentices were white males and 20% were Hispanic males. Compared to men, women had very low representation in the construction trades. Blacks, Hispanics, and females from other races had the lowest representation, as you can see, at 0.8% and 0.4% respectively. Now, when we look at who actually completed these apprenticeship programs, 75% of the program completers were white males, and only 0.5% of the completers were Black, Hispanic, and females from other races. Okay, now I want to talk about the specific trades in the construction industry and show you how the different races and sexes identify and are associated with the different trades in the industry. Now, as of June 30th, 2021, there were over 2,000 apprentices in the carpentry trade, of which 81.4% were white males. Now, even though white females represented about 2.2% in the carpentry trade, it's higher than females from other races, but it still does not compare to the representation of any of the male categories in any of the races. For example, males in the other race category have the lowest representation at 6%. However, it is still higher than the overall female representation. Now, let's look at who completed carpentry, which would be the second row. White males are more likely to complete. Nearly 67% of the completers were white males, whereas only 1.3% and 0.2% of the completers were white and Black females. Now, as you can see, which is interesting, that no Hispanics and no females from other races completed the carpentry program. Okay, for electricians, if you remember from like the first slide that I showed, electricians have like the second highest hourly wage at about $39 an hour in the construction industry. Now, of the 2,400 active apprentices in this trade, Black, Hispanic, and other females represent less than 1% of active participants in the electrician trade. Now, white females represent 2.4% of the active electrician apprentices. However, that representation is still a lot lower than the overall representation of males in that trade. Again, we see that white males are the most represented group in this construction trade. And as you see, a little over 80% of the 518 completers are white males, and less than 1% are Black and Hispanic females. Okay, let's talk a little bit about plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. Now, plumbers, as you remember from the earlier slide, they have the highest wages in the trade. And again, Black, Hispanic, and females from other races represent less than 1% of active apprentices. Now, even more interesting is that over a 5-year period between, 2015 and 2021, no Black females completed the plumbing apprenticeship program. And again, I want to point out that this is the trade in the construction industry that has the highest wage. Okay. Now, when we start talking about construction laborers, it's among like the trades with the lower wages. But females are represented more in this particular trade than any of the other trades. Of the 1,589 active apprentices, 5.5% are white females, 2.1% are Black females, and 2% are Hispanic females. and they are completing the programs at about the same rate that they're, actively participating in the programs. Boilermakers. White females are representing about 5% of active apprenticeships as Boilermakers, and they're completing the program at the same rate. But even though Hispanic females and females from other races enter the program, interestingly, none of them have completed the program. Now, it's also important to point out here that up to this point, this is the only trade where any female representation is higher than any of the male groups. Other race males make up only 2.8% of Boilermakers compared to white females, approximately 5% representation. Okay, operating engineers. Even though white females had a higher representation of other race males, there were active apprentices in the operations engineering trade. When it comes to completion, only 2.4% of the completers were white females, compared to 3.5% of other race males. Now, Black, Hispanic, and other females from other races had a representation less than 1% as either active apprentices or as program completers, which seems to be a trend with these particular trades where the wages are higher. The representation for Black and Hispanic and females from other races seems to be less than 1%. Okay, for roofers, all females in this trade, regardless of race, represented less than 1% of active apprentices or completers in the roofing trade. Okay, it is also important to note that this is the only trade where any group's representation was higher than white males. And that group was Hispanic males and males from other races. Now, at the representation was about 50.7%. Compared to 41.2% of white males. Now, what's interesting is that even though the active participation was greater for Hispanic males and other males, white males are completing these programs at higher rates than these two other groups. Okay. Now, to summarize the data here, these are the things that I pulled out of the data. Female representation in the construction industry, of course, is dismal compared to male representation. Female representation is highest in construction trades with the lowest wages, like for painters and construction laborers. Compared to men, females' participation in and completion of construction apprenticeships is disproportionately low. Black, Hispanic, and females from other races are represented at lower rates than white females, especially in the highest paid construction trades, like I talked about before, plumbers, electricians, and operating engineers. Now, another thing that was very interesting was that Hispanic males had the highest representation of active apprentices in the roofing trade, but completed the program at lower rates than white males. Now, with that being said, that concludes the presentation for the data for the construction industry in Illinois. And at this point, I will send this back to Dr. Suggs. Thank you so much.
Dr. Clark, thank you for sharing this information. This data certainly sheds light on the disparities in construction and the building trades. So I am excited to share with you all that we have an esteemed panel with us this morning who will help us kind of unpack and consider what this information means. So allow me to introduce our panel members. And as I do so, panel members, if you could give a wave for the participants so they know who you are. So I will start with Ms. Christina Flynn, Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program Grant Manager. So Christine, if you'd like to give a wave. Mrs. Flynn earned her Master's of Social Work with a focus on leadership and development from Loyola University Chicago and served as a social worker. She is currently working towards a Master's of Public Administration at the University of Illinois Springfield. alma mater, so we got to give a shout out. Over the last 10 years, her work has included advocacy and leadership in public service, including nonprofit management, fundraising, and program development. Ms. Flynn has been an influential individual in the design, development, and implementation of the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program. So welcome, Mrs. Flynn. I would also like to introduce Ms. Yolanda Roland, PCC Tuck Pointer. So Mrs. Roland, her grandparents migrated from Mexico. She comes from a single mother of 5 who taught them to always be self-sufficient, never give up, and to always be strong. As a child, she wanted to be a carpenter. However, she never saw women working in the trades. In 2019, there was a shift. She was selected for the Technical Opportunities Program through the Chicago Women's in Trades. This experience opened her eyes to the possibilities. In May 2021, she completed the pre-apprenticeship program at the District Council Training Center. Though she felt like an underdog in what would be her new career, she showed up every day and gave 1,000%. She joined the trades as a PCC tuck pointer in July of 2021. She looks forward to early mornings, working hard with good people who want to provide for their families, and has pride in her work. Welcome. Mrs. Dominique Jones, founder and CEO of D. Jones Construction and executive director and founder of Tools Up Foundation. Mrs. Dominique Jones has over 10 years experience within the construction industry. After seeing firsthand the considerable lack of diversity within the construction industry, she vowed to create a revolving door of skilled professionals that looked like her. She accomplished this through the Tools Up Foundation. In addition to her leadership roles, she is an active mentor and instructor. Welcome. And then last and certainly not least, I am excited to introduce Mrs. Vanessa Uribe, Deputy Director of the Office of Minority Economic Empowerment at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Mrs. Uribe leads efforts to create an inclusive business ecosystem for communities that have traditionally faced systematic barriers to entry and growth. Through dynamic partnerships, targeted outreach, technical assistance, tailored programs, and initiatives, the Office of Minority Economic Empowerment provides minorities, women, persons with disabilities, and veteran-owned small businesses and entrepreneurs with equitable access to opportunities and resources. Her previous experience includes managing strategic initiatives for Cook County's Bureau of Economic Development and the National Affiliate Network for Unidos US, the largest Latinx civil rights organization in the country. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Illinois at Chicago. So please welcome our esteemed panelist. So Dr. Clark provided a lot of information for us to consider. I would like for this to be more of an informal conversation than a formal presentation. So I will ask your permission. Is it okay if we address one another informally by our first names? Okay, awesome. Great, thank you so much. So I want to start with our first question, which I will address this to Vanessa. What is your initial reaction to this data?
I think when we see this data and the stark contrast between women and men, it's frustrating, but not surprising. I think the construction trades are reflective of all industries. Having only 3.3% of women and in the lowest wage roles is always, as a woman, it's something that we want to improve. But we've seen so many significant changes from women in the workforce, in the 1940s to where we are today at close to 60%. Men were initially the only workforce at like 89% or 87%, and now they're down to 69. So we're really evening the playing field in the number of folks that are in the workforce. What we're not evening is the types of roles and the wages that they have, and also the sectors and the industries that they're a part of. So it's always a little frustrating to see women pigeonholed into certain industries and certain roles, and then, you know, going further, the demographic breakdown also is drastically different. And we see that especially women of color are disproportionately impacted by some of these different roles and different changes in salaries. And so I just think we have to do better. That means creating systems that are more inclusive and accountable, and really think about not just training programs for pipelines to good careers, but also potentially ownership and, you know, other ways of long-term sustainability. So I'm hopeful for, especially with the esteemed group of women that we have here today, that we're making a difference.
Okay, great, Vanessa, thank you. So Yolanda, you were actually able to break through in your personal experience in an area that clearly, given the data, is not an easy industry to break into. So what was your reaction to this data?
Hi, I'm not sure. Can you guys see me? I'm having difficulties with the video.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We don't know how to figure it out. I'm doing, oh, I think
There
there
you
it is.
go.
There you go. Okay, so yeah, I just started last year for a few months, but as far as the data, yeah, we definitely need, and I would like to see more women in the construction industry. I do remember on my first day on the job site, I saw just one other female. I found out she was a bricklayer, and there she was using a wet saw cutting bricks. And although I didn't know her, I felt proud of her. We're now friends, and every female that I asked on the job site, that's my first question: are you from Seawood? And they always say yes. Um, but as far as the pay scale, I feel like it has always been unfair when we are just as smart and as strong as some of these men. I just feel like we just have to make sure that we as women look out for one another, speak up for each other, and just keep fighting for the same pay rate.
Yeah. It's 81 cents on the dollar. And then the data that Dr. Clark just shared shows an even more egregious in construction and building trades. So it's tough. And there are efforts to make this different, which is why we are all here. And one of those deliberate intentional programs is Illinois Works. So we actually have the grantee manager here with us, Christine Flynn. So Christine, if you could talk a little bit about how Illinois Works is focused on trying to impact some of those disparities.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Gia, for that question. So Illinois Works was strategically designed to focus on women and Illinoisans of color and ensuring that we are increasing equity in construction and the building trades. So kind of just a quick overview of how we're doing that is our system is made up of 3 separate programs. So we have an apprenticeship initiative, we have the pre-apprenticeship program that I am over, and then we have our bid credit program. So this is a really innovative model because the apprenticeship initiative is developing a demand for apprentices. So through that program, all contractors who are providing services or working on capital projects are required to have 10% of their labor force be apprentices, which is a high amount for anyone who's familiar with this space. And then to fill that kind of demand, the pre-apprenticeship program is creating this pipeline. And because our pipeline is so focused on recruiting women, recruiting individuals of color, that pipeline is diverse and it's representative of what the Illinois citizenry actually looks like, which is huge. Obviously, from the data that we just saw, that's not happening right now. So this is a really strategic initiative. And then the last piece is our bid credit program. And that's offering incentives to those contractors who bring on our pre-apprenticeship graduates. So not only are we creating this diverse pipeline, but we're developing that opportunity and incentivizing those contractors out there to hire and retain this diverse population and this diverse workforce. So through these 3 programs, we're creating this long-term opportunity for individuals who didn't have this opportunity before. And that's kind of the biggest impact of this program.
That's great. Thank you for that. So programs like Illinois Works and others help create opportunities similar to the opportunity that Vanessa talked about and how she was able to break through into an industry that does not have a lot of women representation. Dominique, your work is similar in that you not only do you look to break barriers, but part of your personal conviction is to look for opportunities to help break those barriers for other women as well. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about how your work has broken some of these barriers and what credentials or education or training helped you prepare.
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Okay, so I received my construction management degree from Eastern Illinois University. Unfortunately, I wasn't hireable. I went to all the job fairs at school. I went to job fairs throughout the entire city after graduation, and no construction company would look at me. They told me that I didn't have experience, and it's like, well, I was in school, so that's why I don't have experience. So I decided to go ahead and get my master's degree because, like I said, no one would hire me. So in the midst of me getting my master's degree, I had an internship with Madison Construction. Funny story is that my mom was the one who actually got me that internship with Madison Construction. She was in a Walmart. They was doing renovations. She looked for the project manager. She walked up to him and said, "Hey, I have a daughter who just has her degree in construction management. You need to hire her." So I thank my mom for that because it was that advocacy that we all need within this industry to get our foot just through the door. So I believe that my education, having that construction background, and then having that internship helped to land me my job after my master's degree with Clayco Construction. And then at Clayco Construction, I was able to get that hands-on in the field training, which is so important because what they teach you in school is completely different than being out in the field. However, some of the stuff they do teach you, you are able to roll over, but it's nothing like getting that hands-on experience. So what I'm trying to do with Tools Up Foundation is to provide our students with those industry recognized credentials. And that's what we are able to do through the Illinois Works grant that was provided to us, because that's the mission, is to get them prepared, but also that they leave with an industry recognized credential that will allow apprenticeships and also construction companies to take them seriously and know that they are skilled and ready to start working.
Thank you, Dominique. So for both Dominique and Yolanda, shout out to moms.
Yes.
So Yolanda, if I could re-engage you in this conversation, your professional trajectory has included both pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. So maybe if you could share a little bit about how your experience and so based on your experience, what preparation might a woman need in order to be successful in the trades?
Sure. I feel that if you're lucky enough to get in with the company and get sponsored, great for you. But I feel being part of CWIT has been a leg up, not just for me, but for all the women that I have met thus far within the trades. I know Chicago Women in Trade helped me not just prep for the test, but also helped me update my resume, helped me prepared me for my interviews, that when I walked into the Tuck Pointers pre-apprenticeship program interview, I was able to walk in there with my head held high and confident, because that's what CWIT prepared me for that moment. And I'm in the trades because of CWIT. You know, I met women too, through Chicago Women in Trades, who have inspired me, and during my apprenticeship program have also mentored me. I also feel that, you know, with my degree in visual communications, now working in the trades, it has been very useful because I try to see the art in my trade. And I know that I also can see what is a great resource for someone looking to get into the trades or is already in the trades. I know that I can always call on CWIT to either call or email CWIT when I have questions or need help.
It's critical to be able to see people, individuals who are like you and look like you doing the work that you want to do. So Dominique, if I might ask, what factors impacted your success?
Working really hard. Working really hard impacted my success. On top of having mentors, not all of my mentors were women. Most of them were men, because that's just how the industry is when I first started out. So I had a lot of mentors just mentoring me on how to negotiate salaries and just how to conduct myself and just how to try to fit in a sense within this man arena, which was very helpful. But also seeing that women were in high positions as far as construction management positions. When I was working on the new Malcolm X College as a project engineer, the director of the project was a woman. She was a woman from Clark Construction. So having that be my second job out of college and seeing a woman sit here at the head of the table inspired me to believe that I could someday sit at the head of the table as well. And just having that connection and just seeing yourself in a higher role is very inspiring, and it also it keeps you motivated because you face all type of different challenges. So you see the potential, and that keeps the motivation up. So yeah, just those are like the factors that added to my success, I believe. And like I said, the most important thing is just having support, having a support system. I believe that these Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship programs, by having the wraparound services and support services, are important because, yeah, we're teaching the technical skills, but what about when, you know, my car breaks down or someone needs childcare, or, you know, it's all these different factors. I can't pay my phone bill this month. There's a lot of different factors that we are addressing with this Illinois Works grant. And I think that it's going to help to retain our participants to stay within the industry.
Dominique, I appreciate you bringing up the holistic approach that Illinois Works is taking. And I do want to invite Christine, you know, to kind of add to that with respect to both support services and wraparound services, and even the stipend.
Absolutely. Yes, Dominique, thank you so much for citing that. You know, those services are really what makes the Illinois Works program unique, is we have the opportunity through kind of the Rebuild Illinois initiative and the funding that's been allotted for our program to offer support to participants who are facing those barriers. You know, we know that the data that we're seeing from Dr. Clark, yes, it is, you know, systemic discrimination or items like that, but it's also not having support where you need it. It's having barriers that you struggle to overcome on your own. And it's through these wraparound services, through student support services, through stipends that are part of our program, that we're really able to ease, or in some instances, eliminate those barriers for our participants to go through these training programs and begin to build the skills they need, not only in their construction skills, but in their confidence, in understanding that they can succeed in this space, connecting with mentors like Yolanda brought up. You know, that's a huge resource that these programs bring about in both kind of the items we have as part of the program, but also those organic supports that you get from being a part of a pre-apprenticeship program.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Dominique, you talked about what that meant for you to be in the room and to see a woman sitting at the head of the table. And when I when I think about the work that you're doing, you have broken some glass ceilings. And so there are young girls who are looking at you the same way you looked across that table. So if a young girl were to ask you like, what advice you would have for them, or what would they need to do in order to be the next woman sitting at the head of the table like you, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I get this question all the time. Like my DMs are full of women asking me, "What is the path? Like, how did you get there?" And I love it. Like I love to share my experience because honestly, I didn't have no one to really reach out to when I was up and coming. So it's very important to me to voice my experiences to the ones coming up because I want them to see the good behind it. Like it's so much, it's so many benefits within this industry. So first I tell them what my professor told me. My professor in my very first construction class, when I was a freshman in college, I walked in there, only female, only African American, and I looked around and I was just like, what am I doing here? Like, did I choose the right path? Like I was uncomfortable. Imagine me at 18, so just uncomfortable, insecure about my decision and everything. And I thank my professor for calling me out and asking me, what are you doing in here? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, Dominique, if you stick with this industry, if you make it through all the adversity that will come your way, you will shine in this industry. And I really didn't know what he meant by that until I actually started to work in the industry and I saw that there was no one like me. And I tell that to the young people that reach out to me just to build up their confidence. Once their confidence is built up that they can do it, then I tell them you have to work really hard. You have to work probably twice as hard. It's not fair, but it is what it is. And you have to know what you know and know what you don't know and feel comfortable to speak up if you don't know something and have to ask questions. A lot of times women in this industry, we already feel as though people are looking at us like we don't know what we should know, so we feel uncomfortable to ask those questions. Trust me, they half the time they don't even know. So just ask the questions, and yeah, that's like my top tier advice that I always give women reaching out to me. I tell them to just go for it.
Okay, Dominique, I'm just going to put an asterisk by it. Sometimes they don't know either. So it's okay. Okay, so there is certainly a component of this that is there has to be interest, there has to be a will, and honestly, beyond will, based on these stories, there has to be grit and perseverance. But even when you have all of those things, there are still those aren't the only factors. There's still other factors. So let me ask this question. Given all of the barriers that women face entering construction and the trades, what systematic approaches can government agencies and other stakeholders use to effectively reduce those barriers? And because we have Vanessa here with us on this panel, I would like to address this question to her.
Thanks, Gia. I think we're hearing a lot of really interesting insights, right? And I think that government in general needs to do a better job of investing in programs that intentionally target women. And so what that means is, having women's organizations, women leaders, folks that have participated in the programs at the table, developing those programs and making them more impactful. What my experience in both workforce and economic development has often been that many programs are kind of developed in isolation. They're developed, with policymakers, they're developed based on national trends or best practices. And it doesn't always have the folks that are participating and benefiting from the programs at the table helping to shape them. And so we need to change that. That needs to be something that changes systemically. I think Illinois Works is one great example of a strong program that hopefully we can continue to expand and scale. But that's not happening across the board, and so we need to do more of that. Dr. Clark shared information about women not completing some of the apprenticeship programs, right? We know that women often deal with a number of barriers across society, right? Not just in the workplace. And perhaps these programs are not taking those factors into account. So again, another strong reason for having women at the table and women in these sectors and these industries helping to shape the way that they are developed. We also need to continue to create more and more incentives. So the incentive for the credit bids for the Illinois Works, again, another great example. How do we do more of that? How do we ensure that we have employers committed to this and participating in that? And oftentimes the incentive is really the first step. Once they see the benefit of an apprenticeship program, for example, or any other type of training program, then employers are more willing to invest their own funds and their own resources in their workforce. But until we can draw them in, sometimes the conversation is moot. So I think that's going to be another great tool that government can do more of. I think we also need to have more wraparound support, right? We talked about some of these other barriers, and although there's a number of resources and organizations out there that provide childcare or housing services or other resources, they're not always connected, they're not always embedded into the programs, and many of the applicants are not always aware, or the participants are not always aware of how they all connect. So we could do a better job of threading the needle between wraparound support, training programs, and then the long-term career path. And then I think finally, what we might be able to do through government and really just these types of conversations and these platforms is to create spaces for women to support women. So, Yolanda Roland, you mentioned, how you saw another woman and you're like, oh, that was so awesome. Like, what a badass, right? And, Dominique, to have somebody say to you, like, or have representation there, what a long way that went. So I think we could do a better job of having spaces, of holding space for women to support women, and then bringing in male allies, right? If men are dominating this field in particular, then how do we ensure that they're helping to create space for more women? And so we do that through mentorships, both formal and informal, and with safe spaces where we can kind of share some of this information. So I think those are just some ways that we could start systemically breaking down the barriers. There are things that we're going to just have to completely, start from scratch from, and I think that's okay too. We shouldn't always work within the system confines. I think sometimes we should be willing to just try something different. So just some thoughts there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you shared a little bit about the importance of seeing other people doing work that you want to do, and how that is that's critical for young women of color, to see someone else doing that work. And you gave talked a bit about what Dominique shared and what Yolanda shared. So I just want to invite them. Do you all want to add anything to that? Again, just the importance of seeing people like you doing the work that you aspire to do.
It's very important. I know for myself, just speaking from experience, when I worked for McKissick & McKissick, when I built the new Malcolm X College, McKissick & McKissick is owned by a Black woman. So I was so excited to work for her because I said, wow, I don't see us in the field. I don't see us much in management role. And here is a woman who actually owns a very successful and large construction company. And she was opening doors for myself and other women that looked like me to be in those management roles. And I then knew that one day I can own my own company as well. And I knew that if I worked hard, if I believed in myself, if I had faith, and if I just had the courage to step up and do something out of the norm, then I too can not only create a path for myself within this industry and then create a voice for myself within this industry, but also create a voice for other women. And our primary goal is to hire as many women as we can and just give them that exposure that, hey, this industry is here and this industry exists and there is room for you in this industry to be successful. So that's our mission, that's our goal. And I'm just happy that I had the opportunity to see it firsthand, so that it definitely encouraged me. So I think we just have to do a better job at allowing people and allowing the community to see us in these roles. I'm telling you, when I post myself with a little hard hat on, people go crazy. And it's like, wait, what do you do? What's going on? And it's so inspiring. And just, I want to share one story. Eastern Illinois University, my alma mater, they put me on their website as the face of the construction department. So when you log on to Eastern Illinois, I'm the face of the construction department. So now they have a larger increase in women entering into the program. And not only that, the president of the construction club is a young Black woman. So it's little things like that that go a long way. And I'm so passionate about it. And it's just so important. We can't be shy. We can't be shy. We have to shine. Like, I know that's cheesy, but we cannot be shy in this industry. We have to shine.
Dominique, so just I have to pose this. Consider that day when you walked into class and your professor asked, "What are you doing here?" And you said, "You don't know." What if you had have walked out? None of this would have occurred. So thank you for that story. And I also want to, Yolanda, anything you want to add to that? So I also want to invite you to share.
Yeah, just that I definitely would like to see more women in the field. Like I said, these job sites that I went to, it was like a crew of 30, 50 men, and there was only myself and my friend. That was it. So I would like to see that. There are I know I've heard of other women having challenges through their work, through their career, but I feel like I've had a positive um just those few months that I worked. I feel like I'm optimistic about my next 5 years working there. I worked with good men who were willing to teach me, um, show me certain tips on what to do, what not to do. I've even gotten some of their extra tools, you know. But definitely when I do see women on the job sites that I've been on, we do try to motivate each other, hype each other up, that we made it this far, that we're the only women here on this job site with a crew of 30 men, 50 men. Mhm.
Yeah, so I appreciate you saying that. A lot of times when we talk about and think about barriers to entry, a factor is the challenges. Like, what are the challenges on the job site? And I think there might be some trepidation for women who are interested because they are concerned whether or not they will be able to confront those challenges successfully. So I appreciate you sharing that, though clearly there are challenges, but your experience, there were a lot of men at the job sites who were supportive, who
Mhm.
were inclusive, who shared their tools, who gave the women at the site support. So with all the negative things that, when we're talking about this as from a disparity and equity standpoint, I appreciate you sharing that, all the stories aren't those, it was a bad and negative experience. No, it's like there are good people at many of these sites and you can have a good and positive experience.
Mhm. I feel like there are some men who want to see you succeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that as a, I don't know, maybe a shift in thinking around it compared to, I think, how often we think about it.
Mhm.
I do want to ask one more question. Uh, Dr. Ruano posed this question earlier this week, and if I have to give it consideration, I want all of us to have to give it consideration. Um, and I know his conviction for this work and to make a difference. And so he asked, can we still change the world? But not as a question, more like as a challenge. Um, and so I'm going to pose that challenge to you. Who would be interested in answering this question? Can we still change the world?
I'll
So
go.
oh
I
yeah,
feel,
Yolanda, you go
oh,
first.
okay. Yeah, I don't even have to think about that question. I feel like, yeah, absolutely we can. I feel like we have been changing the world, even though it does feel like baby steps. Um, there have been female, and there are female presidents and prime ministers in other countries, female CEOs. Let's look at Oprah Winfrey, from where she started to now where she's at, her net worth. There's also, I know there's also Christy Weber from Christy Weber Farm and Garden. She started as a small, here from Chicago, started as a small plant shop to one of the biggest landscaping companies now and has several men working for her. So, that just lets me know that, like Dominique says, maybe 5 years from now, I can open up my own tuck pointing company.
Absolutely.
And that's where we would love to jump in and provide some support. So through our Office of Minority Economic Empowerment, we talk a lot about, okay, what's the ecosystem for women business owners and women entrepreneurs, and how are we connecting like employment and job training to potentially becoming your own, business owner. And so I think that that's also part of this conversation. Yes, 1,000,000% we could change the world. Yes, we're doing it every day. But what are we doing for the future? You hear the future is female. It really is in many ways, right? And part of that is this conversation about ownership. That's the number one mechanism for building wealth in this country, right? So if we really want to change the dynamic, we need to get elected officials involved. They need to start changing policies. They need to hold employers accountable. Government implements, but they draft legislation that we implement. So then how do we get them as part of the conversation? How do we hold employers accountable, and how do we make sure that we are connecting the dots between job training and ownership? Because Yolanda, you will have your own business, and we're going to try to provide the wraparound support to make sure that you do that for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to echo everything that everyone just said, I mean, my answer to can we change the world is yes, because women always have, right? And that's the thing that everyone has said on this call is the biggest superpower that women have is building community. We know how to walk in and look for another woman and build community with her and support her and help her along. And that is the key to this, is the more that we can get women into these spaces, the more that we can get women to own contracting companies, to be in spaces like Dominique is talking about, to be in spaces that Vanessa works with women every day in these spaces. The more we can build these communities, the more this just become this kind of unstoppable force. So can we change the world? Yeah, we've always done it, and we'll continue to do it, and it's getting stronger every single day.
Right. So this has been, so thank you for that. I feel actually inspired in this moment. So I appreciate it. We have just 2 minutes left, so our time is just about up. But I do want to see if Dr. Clark is available. I know she has been mindful of the chat. Are there any questions from anyone? You can share them in the chat. Honestly, we have an intimate group. You can feel free to unmute also. But Dr. Clark, any questions?
No, at this time, we don't have any questions in the chat.
Okay. So if you do have a question, please feel free to share that. And if not, I just want to thank everyone for their time, for their attention to this, for the really rich conversation this morning, and much gratitude and appreciation for this really rich experience. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
You too.
All right, bye.